Hey there, Storytelling Podcast here. Glad to see you again. Just a reminder, full versions and exclusive stories are waiting for you on our Patreon. Link below the video and in the channel description. Now, let's get to today's story. Moving to the countryside was Laura's idea, my wife. Max, imagine. Fresh air, quiet, no city hustle. I resisted for about 3 months, but eventually gave in. Now I was sitting on the porch of our new house, an hour's drive from Portland, trying to convince myself it was the right decision. The house needed repairs, but overall was decent. 2 floors, a spacious porch, a small garden. Laura immediately set about arranging everything, while I continued to work remotely. In IT, that's not difficult. To be honest, after a couple of weeks, I even started to enjoy country life. Morning coffee on the porch with birdsong is definitely better than in a city apartment with the noise of cars. "Mom is coming for the weekend," Laura announced during dinner one evening. "She needs to clear her head after the divorce." I just nodded. My relationship with Mist, my mother-in-law, was neutral. She always seemed too free-spirited for a woman her age. At 47, she looked at most 40, wore expensive clothes, and wasn't shy about flirting with men. Divorce was an exaggeration. She had just broken up with another boyfriend. After the death of her first husband, Mist had gone through several partners, but none of the relationships lasted longer than a year. "Just for the weekend," I clarified. "Well, maybe for a week. She's really having a hard time right now." That week stretched into a month. Mist occupied the guest bedroom on the first floor and seemed to have no plans to leave. She read a lot, walked around the neighborhood, and sometimes cooked dinner. And she constantly observed me, Laura, our relationship. "You know, Max," she said one evening when Laura had already gone to bed, "you remind me of my first husband." "Really?" "Yes, just as proper, reliable." There was something strange in her voice. Mockery, approval, I couldn't tell. "Is that a compliment?" "I don't know," she smiled. "Time will tell." After that conversation, I began to notice her glances. Long, studying. Sometimes she would appear in the kitchen in a silk robe when I was having breakfast alone. Or, accidentally, bump into me in the hallway. Laura seemed not to notice anything strange. She was happy that her mother was nearby, that they could spend more time together. "You know," she would say, "after Dad's death, Mom changed so much, became kind of restless. But now I see glimpses of the old Mom." I didn't know what to say. Mist was indeed changing before our eyes. But the direction of these changes worried me, especially when I caught her looking at me across the table or felt the light touch of her hand as she passed by. "Do you like living in the countryside?" she asked one day when we accidentally met on the porch in the evening. "Yes, it's peaceful here." "Peaceful?" she smirked. "Sometimes the most turbulent events happen in such quiet places." I didn't give much weight to her words, attributed it to Mist's usual manner of speaking in hints. If only I had known how prophetic those words would turn out to be. And then came that morning. The morning that changed everything. A morning shrouded in milky fog and saturated with the aroma of freshly brewed coffee. A morning I will remember for the rest of my life. I woke up unusually early. Laura was still asleep, her face buried in the pillow. She had a tough shift at the hospital yesterday. Outside the window, fog was swirling, thick, milky like in horror movies. The kind that only exists in the early morning, before the sun has had a chance to disperse it. Trying not to make noise, I went down to the kitchen. The smell of freshly ground coffee always helped me think more clearly. Passing by the guest bedroom, I noticed that the door was ajar and the room was empty. The bed wasn't even disturbed. It seemed Mist hadn't gone to bed. A dim light was on at the porch. She was standing there wrapped in a thin silk robe looking into the distance. Her silhouette seemed to float in the milky haze of fog. I froze in the doorway, not knowing whether to leave or stay. "Can't sleep?" Her voice was as quiet as a whisper. "Yes, something like that." "Come here, look at this beauty." I approached holding a cup of coffee in my hands. The fog really created an enchanting picture. Trees seemed to float in a milky veil, and the distant forest looked as if painted in watercolor. The morning air smelled of damp grass and something sweet. Jasmine, I think. You know, Mist turned to me, sometimes fog helps you see the truth. How so? It hides everything superfluous, leaves only the essence. Her robe opened a bit more, revealing her shoulder. I felt my throat go dry. She was so close that I could distinguish the golden specks in her eyes. And what do you see now? A man. She took a step toward me, who is afraid of his desires. The cup trembled in my hands. Coffee spilled onto the wooden floor of the porch, but neither of us paid attention to it. At that moment, all that existed was her gaze, deep, pulling like a whirlpool. The first touch was light, almost weightless. Her fingers slid along my arm, leaving a trail of goosebumps. The silk of her robe flowed in the half-light, creating a bizarre play of light and shadow. What happened next was like a dream. Her touches, light as fog, burned my skin. Time stopped, dissolved in the milky haze. The world narrowed to sensations: ragged breathing, the warmth of skin, the scent of her perfume. She kissed as if drinking water after a long thirst. Her hands wandered over my body, exploring, studying, beckoning. The silk robe slipped from her shoulders, revealing flawless skin glimmering in the dawn twilight. Reality turned into a blurred watercolor, where only the two of us existed, and this all-consuming fog. Every touch responded with an electric discharge. Every sigh sounded like music. Somewhere in the distance, the first morning bird sang. This sound brought me back to reality. I pulled away, breathing heavily. Mist smiled, calmly, almost triumphantly. "The coffee's cold," she said in an everyday tone, adjusting her robe. I watched her walk into the house. Her gait was light, flowing, as if nothing had happened, as if she hadn't just destroyed my world. I remained on the porch, watching as the fog slowly dissolved in the rays of the rising sun. The cold coffee spread in a dark puddle on the wooden floor. Somewhere upstairs, a floorboard creaked. Laura had woken up. A new day was beginning, and I stood, unable to move, feeling reality crumbling into pieces. The sun had already risen high when I sat in my office trying to work. The code on the screen blurred before my eyes. The morning's events seemed unreal, but the light scent of her perfume still haunted me. "Honey, have you seen Mom?" Laura peeked into the office. "I think she went for a walk." My voice sounded unnatural. "Strange," she usually tells me. "And the coffee is cold on the porch. Did you see her this morning?" I froze. My heart started hammering in my throat. "Briefly, I got up early." "What about the puddle of coffee on the porch?" I accidentally spilled it." Laura frowned. "You're acting strange today. Is everything okay?" "Yes, just a challenging project." She left, and I continued to sit, staring at the monitor. What had I done? How could I live with this now? Every glance from Laura responded with a sharp pang of guilt. Mist returned for lunch. She seemed serene, as if nothing had happened. At the table, she casually discussed some TV series with Laura, occasionally casting studying glances at me. "Max, you're not eating at all," Laura noticed. "Not very hungry?" "You know, dear," Mist suddenly interjected, "your husband works too much. Maybe we should have a family dinner. I'll prepare something special." "Great idea." I tried to refuse, but Laura insisted. I spent the whole evening on pins and needles. Mist, on the contrary, seemed animated. She bustled around the kitchen, humming some melody. "Mom, you seem different today," Laura remarked. "More alive somehow." "Just a good day," Mist smiled, looking me in the eyes. After dinner, Laura left for the night shift. I was about to escape to my office, but Mist intercepted me in the hallway. "We need to talk." "There's nothing to talk about." "Oh, I think there is." She leaned against the wall. "For instance, about how easily you gave in." "It was a mistake." "A mistake?" She smirked. "No, Max, it was a choice. Your choice." There was truth in her words that made me sick. I had indeed chosen to betray Laura. What do you want? I want to understand if you're worthy of my daughter. What? You see, she came closer. My first husband, Laura's father. He also seemed perfect, reliable. And then I found out about his mistresses, about how easily he gave in to temptation. Why are you doing all this? Because I need to know who lives with my daughter, what he's capable of, what he'll do when real temptation comes. And you decided to become that temptation? Better me than someone else. At least now I know the truth. Her words hit harder than a slap. I looked at her, not believing my ears. Was all of this planned? A test? You're sick, I whispered. No, Max. I'm just a mother who loves her daughter. And you know what? You failed the test. So easily, so quickly. She turned and walked away, leaving me standing numb in the hallway. And I suddenly realized that I had fallen into a trap from which there was no escape. The next day dragged on endlessly. I locked myself in my office, citing urgent work. Mist, on the contrary, was unusually active. She cooked, laughed with Laura, made plans for the weekend. I heard their voices through the wall and felt nauseated by my own helplessness. Max, stop hiding. Laura peeked into the office in the evening. Mom made her signature pie. I'm working. You've been working all day. What's happened? If only you knew, I wanted to shout. If only you knew. In the kitchen, Mist was pouring tea. She looked like the perfect mother-in-law, caring, attentive. Who would have thought that under this mask lurked a cold-blooded manipulator? I was thinking, she said, cutting the pie, maybe we should all go to the lake for the weekend. It's beautiful there now. Great idea. Laura was delighted. I have work, I said quickly. You're always working, Laura pouted. I hardly see you. Speaking of work, Mist suddenly interjected. Laura, remember John from my book club? His company is looking for a programmer. Very good conditions. I froze with the cup at my mouth. So that's what this was about. Really? Laura perked up. Honey, maybe you should… No, I replied sharply. But why? You said yourself you're tired of your current job. I said no. Silence fell. Laura looked at me with surprise. Mist calmly drank her tea. What's happening to you? Laura asked quietly. Nothing, just I'm tired. You know, dear. Mist put her hand on her daughter's shoulder. Men sometimes need time to figure themselves out. Their desires. I abruptly got up from the table. I need to work. Max, Laura called after me, but I was already heading for the stairs. In the office, I collapsed into my chair. She was playing with me, methodically, cold-bloodedly backing me into a corner, hinting at work, at my strange behavior. What's next? Direct blackmail? The phone rang. Number not identified. Hello, I said hoarsely. So nervous. Mist's voice was almost purring. This won't do. Laura is already starting to notice. What do you want? I told you, to protect my daughter. And you know what? Now I have all the evidence that you're not worthy of her. What evidence? Oh, Max. These days, phones can do more than just make calls, especially if you install the right apps in advance. I went cold. Fog is very photogenic, isn't it? Especially at dawn. The line went dead. I sat feeling cold sweat running down my back. She had planned everything, from the very beginning, and I had fallen for it like a complete idiot. A storm broke out at night. I lay awake, listening to the wind throwing raindrops against the window. Laura was on duty at the hospital. The house was quiet, only the old floorboards creaking from gusts of wind. My phone vibrated. A message from an unknown number. A photograph. It showed two silhouettes on the porch, in the morning fog. The angle made everything perfectly clear. Then a second message. Come down to the kitchen. We need to talk. I found Mist at the kitchen table. In front of her stood a bottle of wine and 2 glasses. Have a seat. She poured the wine. I think we both need this. Why all this circus? Circus? She smirked. No, Max. This is called a psychological experiment. You're sick. Perhaps. But at least I'm an honest sick person. And you? An exemplary husband who jumps into bed with his mother-in-law at the first opportunity? You deliberately set this up. Of course. And you fell for it. Do you know how long it took me? 3 weeks. Just 3 weeks for impeccable Max to break. Lightning illuminated the kitchen. In its flash, Mist's face seemed almost demonic to me. Laura loves you, she continued. Believes in you. And you're ready to break her heart just to prove you're right? Oh no, I'll give you a choice. What kind of choice? Simple. You leave on your own. Gracefully with dignity. Find a job in another city, or Laura learns the whole truth. With photographs, with details. With the story of how her beloved husband seduced her mother. Seduced? And who will believe another version? Think, Max. Think carefully. I looked at her and didn't recognize her. Where was that woman in the fog? Before me sat a cold-blooded manipulator. Why are you doing this? I already told you, protecting my daughter. From what? From happiness? From betrayal, she raised her voice. From the pain I went through. From a man who can't remain faithful. You don't know me. Now I do. Better than you know yourself. At that moment, the front door slammed. We both froze. Laura entered the kitchen, soaking wet. Shift was canceled, she said, pulling off her wet jacket. Why aren't you two sleeping? Mist smiled. The storm woke us up. We decided to have some wine. Will you join us? I watched as she poured a third glass. How casually she chatted with her daughter. How she played the role of a caring mother. And in my pocket, my phone burned with a message capable of destroying all our lives. In the morning, I made a decision. No more games. I got up early while Laura was still asleep and went down to the kitchen. Mist was already there, making coffee. Decided to repeat? She smirked. No. Decided to end this charade. I'm going to tell Laura everything. She froze with the coffee pot in her hand. I wouldn't advise that. No? Well, I think it's about time. I'll tell her everything. How you planned this, how you set a trap, how you're blackmailing me. Let her know what kind of mother she has. And will you also tell her about your actions? Yes, I'm guilty, but at least I'm honest. You'll destroy her. No. You're the one destroying her. Slowly, methodically, under the guise of care. At that moment, Laura entered the kitchen. She stopped in the doorway, looking from me to her mother. What's going on? Sit down, sweetheart, I said. We need to talk. About what? About how your mother was testing you, Mist suddenly interrupted. And you passed the test, Max. I'm sorry. Laura and I stared at her. You see, dear, Mist sat next to her daughter. After what happened with your father, I became obsessed with protecting you. I watched Max, tried to provoke him, make him slip up. Mom, what are you? I was wrong. Your husband, he's a good man, Laura, better than I thought. I stood there not believing my ears. Even when I practically threw myself at him, Mist continued, he remained faithful to you. And now he was ready to tell the truth, just so he wouldn't deceive you. God, Mom. Laura covered her face with her hands. I'm leaving, today. I was offered a job in Europe and I accepted. But it's better this way, for everyone. She stood up, kissed her daughter on the top of her head, and left. Within an hour, she was gone from the house. In the evening, when Laura and I were sitting on the porch, she suddenly said, You know, I always noticed how Mom looked at you. I was afraid she might try to. Thank you for standing firm. I silently hugged her. Fog was gathering beyond the forest, but now it seemed like just fog. Without any magic. My phone chimed. A message from Mist. You truly love her. Cherish that feeling. The photographs have been deleted. I deleted the message and turned off the phone. Some secrets should remain in the fog, for the sake of those we love. That's all for now. Hope you enjoyed this story. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, hit like, and turn on notifications so you don't miss new episodes. And if you want more stories like this without limitations, check out our Patreon. Link below the video and in the channel description. See you next time.